Greetings everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I wanted to take some time to do a Q&A to answer questions that some of you have about Middle-earth, my channel, and my opinions as well. While my Q&A and livestream videos are similar and somewhat rare, I really like doing both. This pre-recorded Q&A allows me to have researched answers versus a livestream, which is more of my own raw and in-the-moment thoughts and opinions. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and I hope it answers some questions that you may have. Thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. Norman Z on YouTube asks, I wonder how Grima Wormtongue became evil after years of being loyal to his king. I read the Two Towers book, but I did not find any clear information. Also, why is he called Wormtongue? Thanks for the question. From what I can find, there is no clear indication as to why Grima betrayed his king. Perhaps Saruman corrupted his mind, as Grima was already close with Theoden, and it would make it easier to control the king through one of his advisors than to do anything else. When Grima became a thrall of Saruman, the wizard promised him Éowyn for his treachery against the king. And the promise of that lady, along with having significant power in Rohan, may have been enough to corrupt this man. As to why he earned the title Wormtongue, I imagine that those loyal to Rohan and the House of Eorl called him such, for Grima seemed to poison Theoden's mind to favor Saruman, while the wizard's servants roamed free across the land. Even after Wormtongue took exile from Rohan, he remained with Saruman, but it seems that Grima never even really liked him, as he was the one who ended up killing the wizard in the Shire. But after his exile from Edoras, Wormtongue likely had no one else, or perhaps Saruman still had power over his mind that slipped when Wormtongue threw the Palantir from Orthanc and slew his master outside of Bag End. These might just be examples of Saruman's power over Wormtongue breaking in these moments. Even during the scouring of the Shire, Saruman called him Worm, and in this time Grima became almost beast-like. This makes me think that Saruman likely psychologically tormented the Man of Rohan during the events of The Lord of the Rings, but it happens behind the scenes and we don't know about it. His is quite a sad tale. Marion Baggins from YouTube asks, did you think Andy Serkis was perfect for Gollum in the movies? Or did the performance change for the book? Hey Marion, thank you for the question and the continued support. It really means a lot. And yeah, I think Mr. Serkis was incredible as Gollum in the movies. While there may be some other actors out there who could play Gollum as well, I think Mr. Serkis was perfect. He made the character likable when he had to be, and evil or contemptuous in other moments. Gollum would be a really hard character to play, for his broken morals, shattered personalities Gollum and Smeagol, and appearance would make it easy for the audience to dislike and even despise the character. Serkis made us love the character for what he was, and feel sorrow when Smeagol lost the fight to Gollum. However, there is one part in the novels that I wish was in the movies as well. In the books, while Frodo and Sam slept in the pass of Cirith Ungol before coming into Shelob's lair, quote, Gollum looked at them. A strange expression passed over his lean, hungry face. The gleam faded from his eyes, and they went dim and gray, old and tired. A spasm of pain seemed to twist him, and he turned away, peering back up towards the pass, shaking his head, as if engaged in some interior debate. Then he came back, and slowly putting out a trembling hand, very cautiously, he touched Frodo's knee. But almost the touch was a caress. For a fleeting moment, could one of the sleepers have seen him, they would have thought that they beheld an old, weary hobbit, shrunken by the years that had carried him far beyond his time, beyond friends and kin, and the fields and streams of youth, an old, starved, pitiable thing. But at that touch Frodo stirred and cried out softly in his sleep, and immediately Sam was wide awake. The first thing he saw was Gollum, pawing at Master, as he thought. End quote. I love this moment, as it shows the humanity and inner conflict within this former hobbit. He could have been redeemed, and Smeagol almost had victory over Gollum, but his conspicuous seeming ways broke the moment, and Smeagol lost the battle. It is perhaps one of the saddest and most humanizing moments in the Legendarium, and I would have loved to see Serkis portray this just to give it life and add more to the films, but as it wasn't integral to the plot, and since there were scenes that were akin to this, it didn't make it. But those are my thoughts on how Andy Serkis did as Gollum anyway. GV from YouTube asks, what are your thoughts about the Hobbit film trilogy? I know you did a review on the first film, but not the rest of the trilogy. What are some of the things you like about this series, and what are the things you don't like about it? Thanks for the question, I really appreciate it. While I know the Hobbit movies do have some narrative issues and are not masterpieces, I love the Hobbit trilogy for its own merits. While I don't really remember the Lord of the Rings trilogy coming out, and I felt like I've always had those movies to watch, I do remember the Hobbit movies coming out. I always had so much anticipation for each movie and its extended edition. And as I have said before, there are some moments in the trilogy that are just perfect. Gandalf and Galadriel talking about Bilbo, Bilbo and Thorin talking about the acorn from Beorn's garden. These scenes are just absolutely perfect. Again, I know that the movies do have some issues, like pacing and lore discrepancies among others, but they also have their own charms as well. I'm always willing to put aside those issues and enjoy the movies for what they are. Call me a fanboy, because I am, but I have such love and nostalgia for these movies that I really don't care. I'll leave it at that though, before I lose track of time and talk about all of my thoughts concerning these movies that I've had over the past few years, and this turns into a 2-hour video. We'll discuss the movies more in depth in future videos. The Real Dark Whale from YouTube asks, would you ever think of doing a video on the Druidane of Druaith Iaur? Thanks for the question. I definitely plan on making this video. The wild men of the woods have always been fascinating to me, and I'd love to discuss them in their own Beings of Middle-earth video sometime soon. They really deserve it for their deeds and ways of life. Alec from YouTube asks, what if Bilbo was slain by Smaug? And why did Melkor become evil? And what if he stayed good? Thanks for the questions, my friend. If Bilbo had been slain by Smaug, the Battle of the Five Armies likely would have ended in the defeat of the Free Peoples, and Smaug would have survived. For the Arkenstone would not have been delivered to Bard, and the Thrush would not have heard about Smaug's weak spot for him to have been slain by Bard the Bowman. This would have ended with Smaug gaining the One Ring and possibly having dominance over the world, or starting a war against Sauron on his own, for he would have had the One Ring. As for your second and third questions, Melkor was never really good at heart. He always strove to dominate and rule others. If he would have been good, the beings of Middle-earth would have flourished without conflict, for Sauron too would have likely never arisen to power. Justin from YouTube asks, how militarily powerful were the Noldor when they entered Middle-earth? I appreciate the question. The Noldor had one of, if not the strongest military on Arda, besides that of the Valar, when they entered Middle-earth. And had Morgoth not had Balrogs and dragons at his command, the elves could have besieged his home of Angband for many ages, if not forever. While they weren't strong enough to end Morgoth or his evil by breaking into Angband, the orcs, except for in very large numbers, did not stand a chance against the Noldor, especially when the houses of those elves united. But since there was strife between the factions of the Noldor, and Morgoth had foul creations, the strength of those elves could not endure. Paul from YouTube asks, why do you think Tolkien decided to use a frame narrative style for his stories? He could have easily just done any other style, and it could have made things easier on him. Great question, thank you for it. I think Tolkien wanted to build a realistic and deep lore for his fiction canon. While he could have told things from a completely third-person point of view instead of having Bilbo, Frodo, and the others write down their stories, he wanted it to be more like a fictional history of the real world. That's also why Tolkien chose to use soft magic, as magic would be mysterious in real life, and the stories are told from a perspective of a historian. It also leaves room to have more things like magic, Tom Bombadil, the Blue Wizards, and others go unexplained, for in life we don't have all of the answers. If the Legendarium was told by an omniscient narrator, there would be no reason to not know all of those things, and the details about everything. But that just isn't realistic and deep lore enough to have everything explained. It leaves no mystery, no intrigue. That's my take on it anyway. Count Cabbage from Twitter asks, what happened to the Blue Wizards? Thanks for the question. This deserves its own video, but in brief, the Blue Wizards, 2 of the 5, went east and they never returned. While there are some competing ideas in the lore about when they arrived and went east, it all ended in the same way. They were to weaken the Dark Lord Sauron's designs, and we aren't sure if they were successful or not. Perhaps they helped cause his downfall at the end of the Second and or Third Ages, or perhaps they joined him, or were even slain. Again, I kind of like that we don't exactly know what happened to Alatar and Palando, and it makes it more realistic, and their sacrifice to go out east more intriguing. Route 660 on Twitter asks, what if Beleriand never sank? Great question. I would say that many of the elves, men, and dwarves would not have gone east into what we know as Middle-earth. Rather, they would have continued to develop their kingdoms in Beleriand instead. Sauron too would have likely repaired his master's stronghold of Angband if he could, or he would have taken back a different stronghold, or even built a new in Beleriand to challenge the Free Peoples. There would not have been a Numenor, and likely the events of The Lord of the Rings would have taken place a lot earlier and in a different location. That's my opinion on it, at least. Luke had 10 from Twitter asks, since the events that occurred in Middle-earth, in-universe, is our prehistory, what continent do you think Middle-earth itself formed into over a long period of time, i.e., Europe or America? Thanks for the question, and my answer for this is just my opinion. I know that Tolkien despises allegory, so I'll keep this short. Of any place, I would say Middle-earth and Beleriand best represent Europe, with the southern and eastern points going into Africa and so forth. But like you said in your question, continents change over time, and while this is a fictional history of our world, I would still say that there are many differences between Middle-earth and Europe. But that is what it most closely represents in my opinion, and would have transformed into over time. RedTeamReview from Twitter asks, in today's climate, would Tolkien be considered a racist? Thanks for the question, I appreciate it. Now, I know this is a controversial topic, and I'll keep it right to the point. Tolkien is not a racist. Some people in the modern world might believe he is, but that's their opinion. His legendarium takes place in a beautiful land, full of diverse beings. Elves do not enslave dwarves, nor do hobbits make war on men for racial bias. These races desire to live peacefully, even though war or misunderstandings may take place between the kindreds or against the Dark Lords and their orcs. Yes, many of the characters in Tolkien's works have fair complexions, but that is because of geographical locations and nothing more. Like I said in response to the last question, Middle-earth would most closely resemble Europe, of all continents, and Europe is a continent that is north of the equator and reaches even further north. Middle-earth and Beleriand are closer to the north rather than any sort of equator, where would be near Harad and beyond. Complexions of our characters in Middle-earth are based purely on geography. The men who stayed in the east and south after awakening in Hildorian at the beginning of the First Age would have darker complexions, as they were more exposed to the sun and lived closer to the equator than other men. They were subjected to the will of both Dark Lords, making them the Haradrim and Easterlings as we know them. Again, this is purely geographical. These men stayed in the south and east, and they were forced under the dominions of Morgoth and Sauron, whether they desired it or not. Thus, Tolkien is not a racist. Anyone who watches the movies, reads the books, or really knows anything about Middle-earth should be able to see this. The Fellowship of the Ring is made up of 4 hobbits, 2 men, a dwarf, an elf, and a wizard. That is a very diverse group of people, coming together for one common goal: freedom from the tyranny of Sauron. And that's where I'll end my discussion on this topic. To everyone watching, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Noseway from Twitter asks, did you take inspiration from any YouTuber while creating your channel, or was it all you? Thanks for our final question. I took a lot of inspiration from other YouTubers, both to start this channel almost 4 years ago, and to get back into making videos almost 2 years ago. I'll go ahead and give some of those channels shoutouts now. RedTeamReview, who asked the previous question, is a Game of Thrones YouTuber who gave me a lot of advice when I started my channel, and he still offers it whenever I have need. Preston Jacobs, who is a good friend of RedTeamReview and is another Game of Thrones YouTuber, inspired me with his passionate, in-depth looks at literature. I wanted to apply that same passion to our favorite legendarium. Star Wars Theory also inspired me with his great Star Wars content, and I wanted to make similar content for Middle-earth. Finally, the Exploring series inspired me to get back into making videos almost 2 years ago. He does videos on many different fictions, and his Lord of the Rings exploration inspired me to get back into making videos of my own. When he moved on from Lord of the Rings content to explore other subjects, I thought it was too bad that there would be a loss of Middle-earth pieces on this platform, so I wanted to jump in and contribute my own Middle-earth videos for people to enjoy as well. I'll link all of those aforementioned channels in the description, and I hope you guys check them out and send them the regards of the Men of the West. They are really great channels that continue to inspire and help me today. And that's a good place to end today's video. Thank you all so much for watching this Q&A. We really covered a lot of ground, and I hope I answered some of your questions about this incredible universe. Please don't forget to like and share if you enjoyed. Let me know any thoughts, corrections, or ideas that you have in response to this Q&A in the comments below, and let me know your answers to any of the questions that we have discussed as well. To contact me directly or help fund the channel, I'll leave links to our Facebook, Twitter, Patreon, and merch in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. My friend Royan and I just did a new podcast on our Patreon, where we answer some more questions, so please consider checking that out. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with a video on Beruthiel, a frightening Queen of Gondor that will be perfect timing for Halloween. As always everyone, thank you all for the support and joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my friends.